Hello, a very warm welcome. This is Spectrum on Radio and I'm your host Edmond Kizito. On Spectrum tonight we review the week. Some of the issues we're going to be looking at. Uganda plans to buy new jet fighters. Reports today have indicated that Uganda is talking to a Russian company so can get at least 6 jets, not too many, just 6 jets. One jet costs $35 million. We'll be talking about that. $35 million for 6 jets. The other time we bought 6 jets, $700 million. We'll also talk about the standoff between Parliament and the Executive over proposed budget cuts. The Parliament wanted 260 billion shillings. They couldn't find it. They said at least give health 39 billion shillings. The Executive says there's no money, but we can create a supplementary. They've tried to rephrase it and call it a corrigendum, which means a correction on a previous document. We'll also talk about the pension corruption scandal. Men with thick necks accused of stealing money in the pension scheme. 1,000 ghost pensioners created. We'll talk about that. Our guest tonight, we'll talk about Uganda at 50 and what KCC has been doing in evicting encroachers. They were blocked out of places in certain places, and we'll talk about that, whether that is really the end of evictions. Our guest tonight, Honorable Lydia Wanyoto, former Uganda representative at the East African Legislative Assembly. You're most welcome, Honorable Lydia. We're also joined by Mr. Nicholas Opio, a legal consultant at Gabriel, also a well-known social and political analyst. You're most welcome, Nicholas.
Well, thank you very much, and good evening to all the listeners.
We're also joined by Mr. Asuman, Basalirwa, president of the Justice Forum Party, Jeema. You're most welcome. The only political president of the desk. You're most welcome, Honorable Basalirwa.
Thank you very much.
I started with him.
I'm president of my company. I'm corporate president, but I'm not a political president. I'm president of my private. We're also joined by a diplomat, Mr. Kintu, Ugandan deputy head of mission at New York.
He's just running from outside the country.
Political diplomat.
Nobody can at least say. You're most welcome, Mr. Kintu.
Your Excellency, you're welcome.
Your Excellency, 2 excellencies tonight. Well,
congratulations, by the way.
Well, Nicholas, Mr. Nicholas Opio, do you think we should spend on health or should we spend on jets?
Well, it's not just a choice, really, because all of these are crucially important component of our, of our country. We need a secure country in much the same way we need a healthy population. And I think it shouldn't be a choice of either or, but rather a choice of what is best for this country. But I think take the bait away from health and whatever it is. I think that the whole jet thing is personal. To the president, is just personal. Because you see, prior to our debacle in Kenya, the crashing of the choppers, the dramatic crashing of our choppers, Uganda, under President Museveni's leadership, had portrayed a progressive army, professional army, an army that has very good arsenal, has a very good air force. In fact, I'm told from reliable sources, from diplomats I've spoken to at IGAD, that there was actually a big debate between Uganda and Kenya.
IGAD, that's the Intergovernmental Authority on Drought and...
Yes, in Addis.
In the Horn of Africa region.
Yes. They have a head office in Djibouti, but the guy I spoke to is in Addis. The point that they made was that there was a big discussion, debate about whether Uganda or Kenya should actually take the aerial, part of the campaign. And Uganda said, we have a good aerial force, we can do that. So I think that the debacle suffered, the humiliation Uganda suffered by having this spectacular fall is something that President Museveni didn't take lightly. I think the desire to then regain that image of a force that is completely professional. Because I think that Uganda's UPDF is by far a good force, but I think it hasn't reached the standard that they want it to be at. So they need then to begin to restock the arsenal and begin to buy such jets. For me, I think it's more a personal thing about achievement, about not having had the chance to take the army where it wants it to be. Because regionally, the UPDF is portrayed as, or it maybe is actually, a very strong force. But hardened at some point there were loose talks about Kenyan army, So that image was destroyed by what happened in this spectacular drop over Mount Kenya. So I think that is the kind of thing that the president wants to rectify. And I think that's why, for him, it is more important than providing money for the health sector.
Without discounting the gifts of the gist of your argument, this is not a replacement purchase. The helicopter were 2 helicopters, and these are jets. They perform different functions.
Well, it's not a replacement, but the point that you want to make is that we have superior weaponry. I mean, the choppers could have just been an accident. But you see, once you have, because the thinking is that you deploy your best, especially if you're going to a foreign country, in a country where you've had so much success. Like in Somalia. So you deploy your best. At the time, perhaps the choppers were seen to be our best arsenal to go to Somalia. But the point then is it proved not to be. Okay, so now what they want to do is redress that which is lacking. Because I think that the point is you just want to be a superpower in the region.
Asuman, Basalirwa, you are the only person in this room who has expressed an interest to replace President Museveni. What's your own reading of it? Would you buy the jets if you were in State House?
Well, I would buy them. There's no doubt about that. I think it's really one of the challenges we have in this country is President Museveni purportedly articulating a ideological vision, one which is not shared. And I think that's the greatest problem is facing, to the extent that even when he brings good ideas, good for the country, because in most cases he has personalized the country, all these developments are seen from an individual perspective, as my noble and learned friend has articulated. But I want to move beyond that, Edmond. What is security? Why are we buying these planes at this point in time? In my view, what the country should really be doing is to address internal contradictions, to address internal conflicts, to address internal misunderstandings between or among the various stakeholders. Once you achieve internal harmony, oneness of purpose, you cease to be worried about, first of all, internal security threats. So that should be our priority. Number two, as a country, we should also be investing heavily in building cordial relationships with neighbors. Because we will always be told Uganda is under threat from the DRC, from the Sudan, from the Somalia, from Kenya and others. So my view is that we should be investing more resources in building relationships with our neighbors and the outside world, rather than investing in weaponry. Because I may ask, those who had these jets, how did they end up?
Well, but the country has to prepare for war. You don't wait for war at your doorstep.
That is true. That's why I told you I would equally buy them. But I'm telling you, what is more important for the country? We tend to perceive security in terms of weaponry. But the biggest threat to security are internal contradictions, failure to have cordial relationships with the neighbors. That is the biggest threat. That's why you'll find a country like Libya, brother leader had everything, but it couldn't help him. Why? He failed to resolve internal contradictions. He failed to build a very good relationship with neighbors and the outside world. So I think, as a country, our focus should really be on building that.
Right.
If you had all that, I'm telling you, you were asking about whether we should be having jets or help. Even if you had a million jets and you don't have a healthy nation, these unhealthy people are going to rise up in millions. And I'm telling you, you will not use those jets to kill the millions. So I think really it's about priority as a country. And I think we should be building a more progressive and long-lasting plan, shared plan. What is our military vision, for example? And who articulates this military vision?
You can only have one vision. If you have more than one vision, you have division.
Yes, exactly. And who articulates it?
The vision pair.
Okay.
You cannot be one
shares it with who? So for me, I think we are really misplacing our priorities. First things first, and I think that's really where our focus should be.
Mr. Nyago, I can predict what you're going to say, but let's say
why don't you wait?
You don't want to say it.
Because Nyago is
She's also a diplomat.
I wanted to say that we must speak within the context of what's happening in the region, but also in the sub-Saharan Africa, in the Great Lakes, that we are. The environment now, we are constantly threatened by the Al-Shabaab threats that are hovering around us, whether it's north of Uganda, south of Uganda, in the Great Lakes. And therefore, for me, the issue of whether or not we purchase ammunition to secure Uganda cannot be an issue of debate. I think we need it, but I think what should be debated is the ownership of the process. At what level can Ugandans appreciate that we need to secure our country so that it is safe even within the neighborhood? Because we are threatened. I mean, Kenya, recently, the whole of last year's financial year, and even the year before, Kenya is preparing for a very important, it is preparing for three very important landmark events of their country. One, they have a new constitution. They have to get a new constitution. They even had a referendum, which was a very expensive exercise.
Yes.
Number two, they are preparing a general election come 4th of March next year. But what's going to happen that election is that they are getting a new president, because they are having a transition, because Kibaki will not be a president. So they are getting a new, and all this costs money, costs preparation, and they have been hit by Al-Shabaab attacks. And they spent the 2 last financial years having an operation called Linda Inch. So across, Operation Linda Inch, they were cutting across the board to make sure that they protect and secure Kenya at the sea, up north Somalia. And but what happened in Kenya is that the awareness campaign to allow Kenyans to have less ugali, less water, was to tell them, look, you will not have this, or this red network will not be on you, because we must secure Kenya. And therefore you not hear the Basalirwas or the whatever, because they knew that we needed to be secure before we have so the issue which I'm trying to raise on radio this evening is the importance of, I don't know the parameter, but the nationals must be part. They must say yes. There must be a spirit to say yes. We need to purchase so that we are secure. Because
the price, $35 million.
How cheaper can it be? I mean, you don't manufacture these ammunition.
Well, I mean,
so for me, the issue is not the price. Let me say this, and I don't have to even defend anything. For me, the issue is not whether not is to first of all say whether it's a priority, whether we need it. Number two is the ownership of the decisions.
Asuman, very briefly.
Because but now surely.
Okay, because all right.
Because you see, if you get this from a South African exhibition, and then you guys are saying we are quoting the press, that's a problem. Me, I would be happy if this information is gotten through maybe a parliamentary committee on defense of parliament, or a policy statement of cabinet, or an emergency in the national address of a head of state. Like a good practice like we've seen in Kenya. You will not find a Kenyan complaining about purchases of ammunition, because they know
it's open.
You either have it or you are done.
All right. Very briefly before you hear from the diplomat.
I have no idea. Yes. I have no idea. But I'm only giving a picture of why we should be able to own some of these
democracy.
Yes, apologies of the regime.
That's what I'm saying is very important.
It's very important, and I want to ask
ownership of the process.
Exactly, I told about sharing. Yes, talking about Al-Shabaab and terrorists. I just want to find out: is it possible
in Uganda
to prepare to defend yourself against terrorists using jets?
We leave that hand.
I'm just giving an example.
The jets. If you are against for them, tell us. Be honest with us. Maybe don't like the jets.
No, actually, I was perplexed by some of the views of the landed people who spoke first, because you find that my brother, the first gentleman who spoke, was talking about...
No, there's an exception of the landed people, so you have to be specific.
I was talking about
the three landed
Somalia being a personal issue of the president. That's not really true. I mean, Somalia is... Uganda is in Somalia.
Simply is not in Somalia.
Uganda is in Somalia because of an AU and UN resolution. So Uganda is there with the mandate of the African continent on an international mission. Now, on the issue of the jets again being a humiliation, that's not true at all. I mean, these things happen. Look, when Saitoti died,
the helicopter crash,
the vice president of Kenya, a very influential person. I mean, could we have said that that's an humiliation of saying...
Commercial jets accidents can't be compared to military.
I didn't speak when you're speaking, a learned person. Now, So I mean, these things do happen, and I mean, there's no humiliation, there's nothing of that nature.
All right.
Or the image of UPDF being destroyed by 1 or 2 choppers. Well, it's very unfortunate that we lost people, that the choppers got. I mean, these things happen. Saitoti died, and Saitoti is a Kenyan. Moreover, from that very vicinity, the Maasai are not very far from Mount Kenya. And I mean, and the man died. I mean, the vice president, very powerful.
But don't preempt the investigations, because we don't know the cause of that death.
The point I'm trying to make is that really making it sound as if it's destroying the image of the UPDF or a person. That's not true at all. Now, the general also says that Uganda is trying to be a superpower in the region. That's not true. Uganda is not trying to be a superpower in the region. Uganda is just safeguarding its interests. I mean, for sure, look, listeners, I'm certain you're very much aware, Uganda being, say, the Seychelles or Mauritius, which are only threatened by, say, sharks and cyclones, that would have been a different matter.
They would plant palm trees.
It's rational for Seychelles not to have an army. But then, look, even in Seychelles or the Comoros, there was a man called Bob Denard, a mercenary. With 1 or 2 hoodlums. They would go and take over the government of Comoros.
All right.
Bob Denard.
All right.
So the point I'm trying to make is that, look, even if you're the Seychelles, you end up actually with the need to have a military. So Uganda is located in the most volatile region in the world, south of Sudan, east of the DRC, north of Rwanda, west of Kenya. I mean, this is the most volatile region in the world. So now on the other issue of what the President General of Jeema was saying, that look, he was saying that their security should be internal contradictions. Those have been resolved. There are no serious internal contradictions.
There's agreement.
Conflict.
One nation.
Because we have had the 1995 conflict. We have had the 1995 constitution.
Right.
And
elections.
Even the President of Jeema, he can speak anything on air, and he will go back and sleep like a baby.
Right.
No Gestapo type of secret police. Not that they don't know where he stays. Or not that the security apparatus is weaker. The security apparatus we have now is much more effective than Idi Amin's state research.
We have to move
but this gentleman will speak his mind off, who could blast the nation, could blast the president. So now,
we have to move forward.
On the issue of cordial relations, between Uganda and its neighbors,
diplomacy
have never been better.
All right.
The East African community is there. The legislature, which this lady was a part of. I mean, the president himself recently has hosted the Great Lakes leaders to solve the MK2 problem in the Eastern DRC twice. In about 2 months, we are very active members of the AU. Uganda was recently even the chairman of the Security Council.
All right. Okay.
So, I mean, Uganda's relations with its neighbors has never been better.
Points very so. We have to move forward. The time cuts us short, really, so we can talk about that thing. I mean, we really need an army. Even God needed an army in here. When Lucifer tried to overthrow him. Asuman, let's talk about this thing
now. Is in Washington. Is no longer in Uganda.
Asuman, Basalirwa, let's talk about the standard between Parliament and the executive. It proposed budget. They wanted 260 billion shillings. Government said they could not find it. They gave 39. Well, they said at least give them 39.2 billion. Government said they don't have the money. Where is this likely to end?
Well, I think there is the government is actually in a very big moral dilemma, in my view. One, there is already a precedent. Before, government has reallocated resources before from a budget when we were fighting the war in northern Uganda. The money had to be found from other sectors. Okay? So, because there is that precedent, government cannot morally, I am assuming this is a morally conscious government. They cannot turn around and state at the moment that simply because the defense budget cannot be cut, there is no money, no reallocation can be made. That's one. Number two, I think Parliament has even made work quite simple. I was analyzing the proposed cuts from the various sectors, and these are areas which really are not a priority at the moment. You know, talking about inland and outside travels, refreshments, and is it hospitality, to a tune of about 200 million. Inland and outside travels, you are talking about things like 17 billion. So I think that government set a precedent before. At this point in time, they should not really turn back. Number two, the other moral dilemma I want to advance is with regard to the MPs. Are we really now seeing the MPs being now more sensitive to the plight of the common person?
Okay.
That now they can stand up and say, no, to the extent that, for example, if there is a proposal for an increment of their salaries now, they can say no. Because of that aspect. That's the view I am.
Nicholas Opio. You're talking like an NRM person. Nicholas Opio.
Well, you see, I just got back from Gudo this afternoon, and I did pass by Chirandogo Hospital, and there were like 4 ambulances on flat tires.
4 ambulances?
Yeah. Chirandogo Hospital, a huge hospital, one of the Obote 23 hospitals. That speaks to you, yet 21, speaks to the amount of problems we have. I mean, the Monte has been doing a series of photographs throughout the country, and that's just a snippet of what is happening.
Some of us have had a chance to see many government ambulances in one place.
In terms of what is going to happen, and you see, the thing is, I like to quote President Museveni's assistants, and one of whom is now a member of the bench, the Honorable Justice Mark Chibita. He has an autobiography where he writes and says the president is not predisposed to persuasive legal arguments. Because what we have led ourselves into is a constitutional crisis. To get out of this problem, we are going to have to amend the constitution, because the constitution requires,
I think it has to be passed by Tuesday.
Within the first 2 months of its reading.
Which is
coming to an end. I think it's even passed. So I think there's a constitutional crisis. If we had seen this problem quite ahead of time, we would have avoided this constitutional crisis. And I think that now you have a problem where you have expenditures being made which are illegal, which haven't been approved by Parliament. I mean, any legal brain will see that that's a problem.
All right.
Secondly, I think that the other thing that needs to be very carefully navigated is how do we get out of this problem? In many countries in the West, the people are the ones opposing austerity measures. Surprise, surprise, in Uganda, it's the government opposing austerity measures, which for me is puzzling. I don't understand the logic. I think it is insensitive. And I think the MPs are also having a problem. I think they are holding the short end of the stick. While we need short-term interventions to address the biggest problem in the health sector, there are structural problems in the health sector that throwing money to the health sector will be throwing money to a bottomless pit. I think we have got to address this as a policy, but also as a legal matter, to address the structural problems of procurement of health, delivery of health services. Because even those who pretend to have healthcare services from insurance companies, they are being cheated. Fresh in our minds is still the case of an insurance company in Kololo that was being sued by about 7 hospitals. That problem needs to be addressed, and throwing money at the health sector without addressing those problems is throwing money in a bottomless pit.
Okay, we're going for a break, then when we come back we'll hear from the diplomat.
Everybody talking like this in the car, this in the bar. Doesn't even matter wherever you are. With overload, what you really don't know is you get a little bit more. You can talk a little longer. Send text to all your loved ones and laugh a little longer. Get 15% extra airtime guaranteed every time you load with MTN. Simply dial *145#. Get talking all day up to midnight with MTN Overload. MTN. Everywhere you go. When I see from the light, I feel my soul come alive. Memories flooding back. I climb the hills of Chikasi. I see the walls of Chibu. I hear the roar of the lion in me. When I sit from the Nile.
As we celebrate 50 special years, Nile Special invites you to toast to our great land. Nile Special, the rich, rewarding taste from the source. You've earned it. When I sit from the Nile.
Not for sale to persons under 18. According to my calculations, taking 5% of the 450,000, multiplying that by 8, minus 36,000 here, dividing by 72, then...
Is calculating your loan too complicated? Get a personal loan from Standard Chartered. With a low fixed arrangement fee of 300,000 shillings, we'll process it in 1 day. Plus, we'll come to you to arrange it. Just call 0414-340077 or visit standardchartered.com.
Terms and conditions apply. Standard Chartered. Here for good.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
Welcome back on Spectrum tonight. Three lawyers looking at the week just gone by. Honorable Lydia Wanyoto, former Uganda representative by the South African Parliament, Mr. Nicholas Opio, legal consultant.
I think I need to have a better title than just former.
He's also a lawyer, you might not know. Nicholas is associate political party. Mr. Nyago, the new Ugandan deputy head of mission New York, immediately former deputy principal private secretary to the president, Mr. Asuman Basalirwa, president of the Justice Forum Party, also known as Jeema. Mr. Nyago, this standoff, where do you see it going?
Really, I'm amazed because look, what I know is that things to do with budgets, are deliberate and also well thought out. I mean, you don't just wake up one day and say that, because look, the budget framework in Uganda is one of the most participatory in the world. It begins at village level, what they call participatory budgeting. Villages submit their views, these go up to the district level, and then from the district, Minister of Finance gets all these things and then gives them to Parliament. It's mandatory that on April 1st, Parliament must have the views.
Budget framework.
Yes, the budget framework.
Paper.
And it so occurred this year. So this very same Parliament participated in the making of this budget. It's not as if it's something like manna from heaven which fell and people never had any input.
All right.
So now the question is, after these people in the August House had made their submissions in this budget, how come now they are
disowning what they started?
Which the parties they didn't start it, because this thing starts at the village level.
Yes.
And goes up
until it reaches
level, district level, the national level. And then the experts in the Ministry of Finance makes the budget framework, which the Minister of Finance presents to Parliament.
Okay.
And all honorables are supposed to give their input. And this must be in Parliament by April 1st. And it was so in our Parliament.
So the
and by May 1st, the Parliament had approved this budget framework.
Okay.
And now the question is, why now?
All right.
Why now? Why come at the tail end when you? Because I think people are trying to play cheap politics.
All right.
People are trying to become demagogues to get cheap politics because say they have got some constituency in the unions, health unions.
Right.
They want to be re-elected at the expense of the nation.
The suffering masses.
At the expense of the nation. Because these views in this budget are not views of one person. As I've just told you, they come from the village level. Yeah, it's a bottom-up approach that Uganda employs to make its budget.
Let's move to horrible.
So really, the question is, how come now? And now someone has been talking about some illegality. There is a vote on account that was passed by Parliament up to October. So the money being spent now is actually not illegal, as somebody was imputing.
All right. Let's Honorable Lydia Wanyoto, talk to us about this. You are a legislator at a higher level.
Yeah, I did chair the budget committee of the East African Parliament for 10 years. And before that, I used to negotiate for Uganda. I used to be a staff of the Ministry of Finance. Now, the budget framework that my colleagues are talking about here is just the principles, the agreed areas, the priorities of a financial cycle. I think the debate is no longer the priorities now or the whatever, it's the figures. It is the figures.
Yes.
Because the principles I actually read it, and I want to just say that
the weight of the budget.
A budget is actually a political statement which is a creature of a manifesto of a ruling party, and also it must be within the development plan of a country. There are those relevant documents that you must have: the constitution of a country, the manifesto of a ruling party, the document, the vision, the budget, the country framework, development plan of a country, and stuff. So for this particular budget cycle, of course, by April, there are the principles and priorities because of the small basket of our resources. You agree on priorities you're gonna spend on the next 12 months. So the debate in Parliament now, and also it's no longer a standoff. Because really, as of yesterday, okay, let me just say this. As of yesterday, I think it is done. They just have to look for where the money is. So for me, the English, I went to school to study. It's no longer. So yeah, I mean, the temperatures are okay. They are going to. They have to come back on Tuesday
and approve it.
Because you remember, it's even here that they came from 260 to 39.2. Now the issue is no longer whether or not to give the money. It's where it should come from. Because it was and it had come down. And it was what me, I don't like derailing so much.
You know what happened?
We should be progressive.
Yeah,
I agree about the quarrel and the debate. We are already past that. Right. Let me finish on this one because we have made progress really.
You know, I've stated.
And the challenge, like what Mr.
walked away from the city, came back.
Yes. So they've made the progress. Those are negotiation skills. Many times in Arusha, you leave your documents in the room, you go and speak Swahili, you come back and you have moved. So progress has. I want to tell our listeners that we should not live in the past. Progress has been made. Progress has been made.
All right, let's
actually, it has moved from 260 billion
to 39.2.
At least for now, to 39.2. And what's remaining now is not whether or not to give the money. It's where it should come from. And also applied Parliament because they've been able to look at what Maria Musoke said during the budget statement that we must we must begin doing away with what we call non-productive expenditures.
All right.
The teas, the seminars, the unnecessary travels. Let me tell you, it's very simple. If you have a trip abroad,
economy.
Well, not even economy. Look, if you have a trip abroad and you have put there 5 officials to go to the same conference, Uganda can be represented by 1 person.
Oh, you sure?
Or even with a mission ambassador. It depends. You can walk around and it's happening in other countries of East Africa. One cannot because people are cutting to fit the jacket. So some of those expenditures, if you are semi running for 4 days, you can walk around it and remove the opening and the niceties and run a seminar for 2 days. You say
reduce the number of sources.
So one of the things that they are working on now, ensuring that we look at operational costs so that we have delivery of services. But just a second,
yes,
the representative of Roxy Parliament and other stakeholders in this is to have a serious audit trail and budget tracking. It's so painful to say now you see you've allocated money, that money never actually, and not just go to single hands. So the issue of corruption is still with us. And when this money is finally allocated, let's do the work. So let's see service delivery. And that cannot stop today. There should be a serious audit trail and budget tracking of what we are spending on.
And address the thickness. So, Honorable Basalirwa, let's talk about the pension corruption scandal. This week, officials of the Public Service Ministry were detained. Their homes were searched. None of them was a tiny house. We know the president came, he lived in a very small house. All these houses were bigger than the president's old house. This pension scandal was a big story during the week. PS were Mappa with an interesting hairstyle. He was detained, later released. What do you read of this? What do you think is going to happen? The president has ordered a ministry-wide inquest into this funding. What is it going to end, you think?
Nothing is going to happen, if you want my honest view. By virtue of the Inspectorate of Government Act, I'm supposed to declare as president of Jeema,
yes,
and I make annual declarations of my wealth. I am not very sure
how many pages.
Well, just 1 page, because what do I have?
It's one of the number of suits of hand.
The problem is that the problem is that they make it many pages. Those guys, your wife, see what? And be 1 page.
Take exception. Wives cannot be part of the paper to be declared. No, I'm on this way. Please.
It means it is
no, I'm still the game like you cannot put you as a property. You know what property has not been declared. Yeah, I think the guys are that one. No, in fact, that's what
they say what the woman has. I'm not talking about declaring the woman. No. But I think there has been a failure in implementation of very many of our provisions in the law. For example, if these guys were declaring their assets, okay, by virtue of the law, perhaps some of those issues would be emerging now and would be raising concerns. But you see, the declaration of assets has also now become a mere ritual. It is a fashion statement and sometimes used to fight political wars. Number two, I'm telling you, I think it was Chinua Achebe who said if you send a kid to steal to a neighbor's place, when he reaches there, he will just kick the door because he thinks that what you have told him to do is actually right. I have said on this show that fighting corruption will not be done through such things. Corruption, countries that have fought corruption, and I've told you Uganda has some of the best anti-corruption laws in the world. I'm speaking from experience in the world.
Yes.
But that has not stopped it from being corrupt. In fact, each day a scandal is unleashed in the media. If we don't have,
which makes the media look like chicken.
Exactly. If we don't have exemplary leadership, there is no way you are going to fight corruption. In other words, the current leadership, nobody in the current leadership has no moral authority to fight corruption.
For me,
I think what we need as a country is actual political redemption. And I'll tell you the other aspect of prosecution. And I'm talking as a senior lawyer in this country who has argued many cases
successfully
in the courts of judicature. Yes, in the courts of judicature. There's a problem. First of all, the investigation machinery has been crippled in terms of finances, and human resource. Has been crippled completely. When you come to prosecution, the prosecution department has also equally been crippled. So how do you expect crippling institutions to be at the forefront to fight corruption? It's not going to happen. So we actually need a political redemption in this country. If you talk about a new lease of life.
Fortunately, we're in a democracy, President General Basalirwa. Fortunately, we're in a democracy with one of the best constitutions in the world. And the redemption did occur last year in 2001 when Ugandans overwhelmingly voted current government.
68%.
70%. Mandate.
But point of order.
That's a landslide.
My brother, the point of order. It's in order for an ambassador to really take on a partisan approach.
You're speaking facts.
Like 1 + 1 is 2.
And I know that there's a difference between facts and truth.
Yes, no one. So really, but much more fundamental.
Remember, you're listening to His Excellency the Ambassador.
No, I'm not His Excellency.
Go on, sir.
Yes, Mr. Ambassador. Now, much more fundamental. Look, these scandals, which are very, which are really bad, are being unearthed by our institutions, either through the press, investigative journalism, and people are not being bumped off like it was in the past, or by brave souls and hard-working policemen, or by the IGG. Whatever it is. These people are not being investigated or unearthed by the FBI or the Scotland Yard. It's either the police of Uganda or the local dailies we have in this country, or the hard-working police people in this Uganda or the IGG. So that shows that things are working. It's a struggle for sure. There are challenges, but things are working, and it's not hopeless. There's a lot of hope, and I'm certain that there's no impunity in this country. Those people who steal this money are going to go to the courts of law.
Okay.
Look, in the past, what occurred? I remember in Idi Amin's time, Idi Amin appointed Jeema Lieutenant Colonel Jeema Ali, to head an anti-corruption committee, and he was shooting dead people, and the man didn't have any clue about what the law was.
And corruption ended.
And but now, well, if our judges set people free because of the law, whatever it is, that's how it is. I mean, you can't put them in kangaroo courts.
Just make 2 quick points.
Yes.
One on impunity.
Yes, go on, Nicholas.
And then the date September 21st is especially important to me in as far as defining impunity is concerned. Classic case of UPDF officers in the 4th Division, names are known, walk into Gulu Central Prison, shoot dead at point blank.
When was that? Idi Amin?
2002. Shoot dead a suspect within the confines of prison. Nobody has been tried. And you say there's no impunity?
Did you sue them? I mean,
there's a suit. Even the dead body of the person hasn't been given back to the family for decent burial. And then the Honorable Ambassador says there's no impunity.
All
right.
Okay, that's the point. But the second point I want to make is this, and then just to remind him that things happen, and people turn a blind eye on them.
Okay.
And this was an intelligence officer of the 4th Division.
Okay.
He's been promoted since then.
Hold there for a minute.
The second point
I've never seen the ambassador very emotional.
Second point.
Hold it. Listeners, this is Spectrum on Radio 1. Tonight we are reviewing the week. You might not be able to call in tonight, but you can send us a comment or question. Send it to 7197. What you do is type the word Spectrum in your phone browser, question, message or comment, and send it to 7197. That's Spectrum message body, send it to 7197.
The second point I want to make, I mean, as the body of Mr. Oloya, popularly known as Yumbe Ngulu, is still being held by UPDF somewhere, we don't know. The point I want to make in reference to what you've just asked is this. I think Ugandans need to begin to dot the I's and cross the T's. For far too long, corruption scandals break. We kind of forget about them and move on, as if it is normal. The description of what has happened appears to be, in the words of the ambassador, unhappiness just once. It's not the trend, it's not the policy. Look at every government ministry over the years. Huge corruption scandals have broken. I dare say that if you open the veil, I think even Kintu's own backyard is rotten.
Or lawyers.
I can tell you. Or even judges, even my own, could be rotten. I think we need to begin to accept that there's an institutional malaise or ignorance about corruption.
Honorable Lydia Wanyoto, let's hear your views on corruption.
Europe and so forth.
Can you contain the ambassador?
Yes, diplomatic immunity.
When is he flying away?
Needs to be taken for induction. I had raised the issues of corruption and that we will be taken for a ride if we finally get the 39.2 billion to the health sector and nobody goes out to do actual baggage tracking and release of these monies and audit trail to ensure that the service delivery and that the money, there is value for money for our people. To me, that's where really it hurts, because even what we have today, if it was put to good use, there will be some semblance of service delivery. There will be some stability, and the people would be happy, would be able to survive. But the situation out there is so terrible, and when you hear what's happening, we really need to a little more to deal with the issues of people taking away what they do not deserve.
Let's move forward. Still with you, Honorable Wanyoto, as I'm talking about corruption, the eviction of encroachers, before we talk about Uganda at 50. The eviction of encroachers, MPs went to a certain place, a man called Imani Raguha. If you can't pronounce the name, just say called a man called Mani. They went to his place to try to build a fuel station and they couldn't get in. Maybe they're having lunch and they couldn't open. Do you think the steam has been lost? They are trying to break down buildings built in the wetlands. Is that an end? Is that a dead end?
First of all, it's not the mandate of members of parliament to break. Maybe they were just invited as stakeholders to witness. And I think we should also be putting the record correct. People should be working within their mandates. So if they had been invited to witness, but then the operations was not successful, then we need to watch and see where they did not get it right. But I don't think that anybody is above the law in Uganda, and I think that's what some agencies are trying to do. There is nobody that can say there is no access to this room or you cannot. If they're in the wetlands, they will be done with. On the issue of Uganda,
we'll talk about that later. Let's first, Honorable Basalirwa, the encouragers, do it very briefly in a sentence or so. Do you think they couldn't open the door when they knocked? Maybe they're having lunch and they thought.
Well, I think let's also be very fair to our people. For quite some time in this country, the leadership and the people have actually been conniving to transgress the law, which is very unfortunate. I'm talking about the leadership, of course, the political leadership, the national leadership. I didn't want to say the NRM. I didn't want to say that
tonight,
for purposes of modesty. For purposes of modesty. Go on. But let me now say it. The NRM leadership, for quite some time, has been conniving with the ordinary people, the masses, to transgress the law. Those guys you are seeing over there, you'll get surprised. that a good number of them have clearance from relevant authorities to undertake developments in those areas. Now, rather than first of all addressing who authorized constructions in wetlands, who authorized the constructions in for example, road reserves, we are punishing the ordinary people. Some of these guys, by the way, have even permits from local authorities, have clearance from...
That's not to endorse what they've done, is it?
No. You see, the point, that's why I talked about connivance. That's why I talked about connivance.
Yes.
And in connivance, when you connive, there is communication. Exactly. So, the one who authorized and this one who actually benefited from the unlawful decision are equally culpable. So I think that's what we should really be addressing.
What's your view on that?
Well, my view is this, Edmond. I mean, when you see a whole executive director running to a committee of parliament seeking for help to demolish just a small structure on the junction between Yusuf Lula and Speak, you know, pavement. Then you know there's a problem. You know, that problem I think needs to be addressed and addressed urgently, because truth be told, this is being done in broad daylight. Buildings mushroom. Why should we wait until buildings have reached roof level to, you know, actually demolish them? There are more powerful people behind these mushrooming structures, and each time you go to demolish them, you know, you find problems. I can tell you, I was witnessing the attempted raising down of the building just near Nakumat here. When KCC officials went, the place was being guarded by soldiers. You have absolutely no idea what soldiers are doing on private property. That tells you the extent of the power.
Mr. Junior, let's talk about Uganda at 50, the political journey. We mark 50 years next year, and let's look at give us your own analysis. What are the buttons Uganda could have pressed that it did not press over the 50 years? Structural bottlenecks over politics and economics, and as a common conscience as a nation. What could we have done better?
Well, I could say one is that independence was good for us, because you find clearly before independence, when you look at our fathers, mothers, and so forth, I mean, many of them remain to be peasants, and that's not because we are more cerebral or more talented than them. It's simply because under the colonial rule that took place here for 60 years, hardly anything in terms of the development of the social sector was affected. So much of the education that took place, look at Makerere University before independence. I mean, there were hardly about 1 or 2 or 3 courses there: education, hospitality, and so forth.
That was medicine. My father did medicine in 1940s.
That's one of the few. But after independence, that's when you find many other professional courses coming on board, say BCom and so forth and so forth. And then you find that all this really, but even education, the numbers of schools constructed in Botewan or Idi Amin are mainly so under this government, or the UPE program and so forth. So really, independence is the best thing we as Africans have received.
Right.
And I think so.
Should it have come earlier?
Oh yeah, it should have come earlier.
Do you think so?
But I think that also our democratization under this government has been something well deserved and has really made our independence much more worthwhile.
Honorable Wanyoto, Uganda at 50, where the battles
first of all, 9th October is my birthday. So I'm very emotional about that.
Would you like to give us the number? How old will you be?
Women and music are not dated.
You just need to know that I was born on 9th October. And for me, I'd like to make sure that all those of us that were born on 9th October, in those days they used to give us so that the way I would have gone to the function, and we were special children, they would call us to be at the front, anybody whose birthday. But these days, the protocol has changed.
Right.
But that said, I think that's important for us to have had self-governance, if I may call it that way, and that we should have been allowed to. We've made our own mistakes for the last 50 years. I think we should now style up. We've had civil wars, we've fought each other. It is a time to take stock and say, look, we have done things easier, because Kenya has had that route, Rwanda has had, but we should not be too complacent.
All right.
And we are living now, the ICT revolution is with us. Things should be, we are part of the global world now, so we should be able to raise the occasion and have better systems to show that we can actually govern ourselves better.
Kenya marks its own 50 years, I think, next year.
Yesterday,
let's talk about our country.
Yesterday I was in Parliament.
Yes.
I accompanied my colleague Mwanga Chivumbi. I was in the gallery, and the Honorable Okupa Elijah and the Honorable Theodosic
from Kasilo.
Yes, rose on the floor of the house and said, we hear we are going to celebrate 50 years.
It's a rumor to them.
We see things being constructed. Do we have a statement from government to the nation in as far as the 50 years are concerned? And I recall front bench looking at each other, and out of the blue, Honorable Kajura comes. I don't know why they were looking laughter, especially from the NRM side. He comes and says, the person making the statement, Honorable Murulu Mukasa, is on the way coming. Up to now, we are waiting for the
still coming.
But finally,
yes.
For me, whenever we are talking about celebrating our independence, I only have to go back to the national anthems. For Uganda.
Now to remember my birthday.
Yes. For Uganda.
We'll definitely send you
may God uphold thee.
Yes.
For Uganda, may God uphold thee.
It's a prayer.
Okay?
Yes.
Are we upholding godly values? Number 2. For Uganda, the land of freedom.
All right.
Are we a free country?
Nicholas.
Finally,
yes.
For Uganda, the land that feeds us, by sun and fertile soils grown, blah blah blah. Is that what is as a country?
You're not alone. Nicholas,
so for us, that's what we should be asking.
If I may,
Nicholas.
Again, just to go back to my story, my long journey today from Gulu, the point that I want to make every day. As a young boy studying at Laibi College, there was some semblance of independence, fruits. We used to climb on train before they pick speed and jump off in the Kampala crossroad. I passed there today. It's a garden. No more
How
railways.
Do they grow there?
No more railways. And then that is what we have. Independence, brought these things were there. It's run down. Again, just to come down to.
That's good you are there. So
it's excellent I was there. Excellent I was there. And for me, I look at the tarmac road between Kona Kamdini and Gulu is an independent, is an Sanobote tarmac. It's extremely bad road. Those are the things that remind me every day of independence.
We have to go. The final word tonight.
When did we lose it?
The final word tonight goes to Charles Olupot from Kumi. He says, Spectrum, we need patriots and nationalists to fight corruption. Unfortunately, we don't have any strong statement there. He also says, somebody else says, the government of Uganda has the capacity to fight corruption, but our leaders are simply not serious because they are a party. We want to qualify or disqualify that. Thank you very much, dear guest. Honorable Lydia Mtende, former Uganda representative at the East African Parliament, Mr. Nicholas Opio, legal consultant, architects also at political pundit, Mr. Kintu Nyago, new Ugandan deputy head of mission in New York, and Mr. Asuman, Basalirwa, president of the Justice Forum Party, Jeema. I've been your host, Edmond, Kizito Spectrum. We'll be back on Monday. Have a blessed weekend.
Hello, Uganda. This is Regina Bell. And for my very first time